Cosmological arguments are a type of argument that ultimately try to answer the question of why is there something rather than nothing?
Okay, so the one thing all these arguments have in common is this. The universe just isn't self-explanatory. I mean, think about it. It's constantly changing, things cause other things, nothing lasts forever. It just cries out for some kind of ultimate explanation, a final why. And for all these arguments, that final answer is God. You can kind of think of it like a detective story, right? All these philosophers are trying to solve the same case, the mystery of existence itself. But they're all starting with different clues. Some are looking at motion and change, others are zeroing in on chains of causation. You've got some looking at things that just pop in and out of existence, or the beginning of the universe itself. And hey, some even start with the existence of their own mind. It's all about finding that one complete explanation. All right, our first stop is way back in the 13th century with the absolute giant of philosophy, Thomas Aquinas. Now, Aquinas wasn't really concerned with what started the Big Bang billions of years ago. No, his question was way more immediate. He was asking, what's keeping everything going right now? So Aquinas starts with a really simple observation. Things are in motion. They change. And for him, motion just means any kind of change. So think about a block of ice. It has the potential to become a puddle, right? But it can't melt itself. It needs something else that's actually hot, like the sun, to make that potential happen. The key takeaway? Things don't just change themselves. Okay, and here's the really crucial part. Look at this chain. Hand moves stick, stick moves stone. Aquinas isn't talking about a line of dominoes falling one after another through time. No, this is all happening at the same time. It's a chain of dependence, right now. My hand moves the stick as the stick moves the stone. If I stop moving my hand, the whole thing just stops, instantly. So the bottom line for Aquinas is that this chain of movers happening right now can't just go on forever. It's gotta end somewhere. There has to be a first unmoved mover, something that's the source of all this change but isn't being changed by anything else. And this unmoved mover is holding the whole system up at this very moment. And you guessed it, for Aquinas, that's God. His second argument, it's pretty much a remix of the first one. This time, instead of focusing on motion, he's talking about sustaining causes. Just think about a lamp. The lamp is on because of the electricity. The electricity is on because of the power station. See? It's another one of those simultaneous hierarchical chains. If you shut down the power station, the lamp goes out instantly. So there has to be a first uncaused cause that's keeping everything in existence moment to moment. Okay, let's shift gears now. We're moving on to another pair of arguments, but these ones start from a completely different place. They don't start with motion or cause. They start with a really fundamental and honestly kind of weird observation. Everything you see around you didn't have to exist. So to really get these arguments, we need to lock down two key terms. First, a contingent being. That's just anything that could have failed to exist. You, me, this planet, we're all contingent. Then you have a necessary being, and that's the complete opposite. It's something that cannot not exist. Its own nature is the reason it exists. Okay, so Aquinas' third way, this one can be a bit of a brain bender, but stick with me. The logic goes like this. We know for a fact that contingent things exist. But if everything that ever existed was contingent, then it's possible that at some point in the past, nothing existed. And if there was ever a time with literally nothing, then there would be nothing now, because you can't get something from nothing. So the only way out is that there must be at least one thing that isn't contingent, something that has to exist, and that's his necessary being. All right, now let's fast forward a few centuries to Gottfried Leibniz. Now this guy was obsessed with reason. He believed that everything, and I mean absolutely everything, has to have a complete and total explanation for why it is the way it is. He called this powerful idea the principle of sufficient reason. So where Aquinas looked at individual contingent beings, Leibniz looks at the whole collection of contingent facts. Think of it this way. Aquinas asks why this particular tree exists. Leibniz steps back and asks, why is there a forest here at all? He says even if you could explain every single fact inside the universe by pointing to another fact inside the universe, you still have to explain the biggest fact of all. Why does this entire universe exist? And that explanation, he says, has to be a necessary being that exists outside of it all. Okay, now we're going to shift gears in a big way. Everything we've looked at so far, with Aquinas, Descartes, Leibniz, it's all been about sustaining causes. What's holding reality up right now? But the Kalam argument, this is totally different. This is the one you've probably heard of. It's about causes stretching backwards in time, just like a line of dominoes. This argument goes way back to medieval Islamic philosophy, thinkers like Al-Ghazali, but it's been made famous today by philosopher William Lane Craig. And it's so powerful because it's so simple. It's just 3 steps. 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore, the universe has a cause. That's it. And this is the key difference right here. Aquinas' arguments were about hierarchical chains holding things up in the present moment. The Kalam argument is a straight line going back in time. It's a temporal chain of causes that leads all the way back to an absolute beginning, around 13.8 billion years ago, which we now call the Big Bang. Okay, for our last argument, we're not looking at the cosmos, but at the mind. And it comes from the guy who gave us I think, therefore I am, René Descartes. But for him, just knowing he existed wasn't enough. In fact, it just opened up a whole new can of worms. Descartes' argument is pretty unique. He looks inward and says, okay, I exist, but I'm a finite, imperfect being. He's got this core idea that a cause has to have at least as much reality as its effect. You can't get more from less. He knew he couldn't have caused himself, because if he had, he would have made himself perfect, right? So he concludes that some other perfect being must be the cause that's sustaining his imperfect existence, right here, right now. Okay, so we've laid out 6 different arguments. Now for the fun part. Let's see how some of the sharpest minds in philosophy, like David Hume and Bertrand Russell, tried to tear the whole thing down. We're going to look at 4 major objections. First up, and this one is a huge challenge, comes from the great skeptic David Hume. Hume says, hold on a second, do we ever really see causation? Think about it. We see one event, and then we see another event that always follows it. But we never see the actual causal link itself. We just see a constant conjunction, as he called it. We just get used to it. And if we can't be 100% sure that everything even has a cause, well, that pulls the rug out from under a lot of these arguments. And the objections don't stop there. First, you've got the classic infinite regress problem. Why does a chain need a first cause at all? Why couldn't it just go back forever and ever? Then there's what's called the fallacy of composition. Just because every part of a thing has a certain property, does that mean the whole thing has to have it? Like every person has a cause, sure, but does that mean the entire universe needs a cause? And finally, some people just attack the destination. What does it even mean for something to be a necessary being? Can we even make sense of that idea? So, which arguments get hit by which objections? Well, that's the crucial thing to remember. Not all objections apply to all arguments. As you can see, the infinite regress question is a huge problem for any argument based on a timeline, like Kalam. But for Aquinas' arguments about what's happening right now, it doesn't really apply. Hume's attack on causation is a big deal for some, but not for others. The fallacy of composition really targets arguments like Leibniz's, and pretty much all of them have to deal with that tough question about a necessary being. It really shows that each argument has its own unique vulnerabilities.
Finally, even if we accept that the cosmological arguments are completely sound, what do they actually prove? The conclusion of all of them is that there must be a necessary being, but does that necessary being have to be the God of classical theism?
This critique focuses on what's often called the gap problem. There's a pretty significant logical gap between proving a necessary first cause on one hand and proving the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good being on the other. And you can break this down into 3 core issues. First, the argument doesn't establish those key divine attributes we associate with classical theism. It doesn't prove the being is omnipotent or omnibenevolent. Second, as Hume and Russell suggest, the necessary being could just be the universe itself, which would remove any need for an external creator. And third, the argument doesn't prove there's only one such being, which leaves the door open to the possibility of polytheism.